Thank you for joining us. I have in my midst Innocent Muhizi, as well as Lacina Koné. Please, gentlemen, have a sit down. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And again, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's great to visit with you this afternoon. I'm tasked with injecting a very energetic jolt into this session, especially in the aftermath of lunch. But as I've indicated, I've come with a little bit of an African squad. I have in my midst two individuals who between them have at least 4 decades of, let me say broadly, digital experience. As I've indicated, Innocent Muhizi, as well as Lacina Koné. Innocent is, at least in his current status, the Chief Executive Officer of the Rwandan Information Society Authority. But prior to that, much experience in the technology field and particularly in banking. Lacina is the Director General and the Chief Executive Officer of a Pan-African initiative entitled Smart African. We'll get color on that as we traverse through our session over the next half an hour or so. Now, at the outset, I perhaps would just make a few remarks that I find incredibly titillating with respect to the continent. In many respects, when we talk of technology in the developed world, we very quickly tend to make the suggestion of disruption. The idea that there are new players disrupting the incumbents. The idea potentially that there are winners and that there are losers. And even in the developed world, we may talk about the winner takes all idea. In other words, these tech giants, by sheer weight of their size, are able to just amass more greatly, amass more customers and dominate their fields. And I think to some degree that jars with Africa. In Africa, technology seems to be more developmental than disruptive. And perhaps that speaks to the gap in terms of hardware, infrastructure, relevant local software availability that allows players to enter into the market, and sometimes a market that is uncharted. I was gripped by the opening session where the chairman of DP World spoke about we're not looking for firms or locations that are profitable but lack growth, but we're looking for growth. And perhaps by definition, in that Africa in many respects is in infancy, that suggests robust opportunities for growth. And like elsewhere, where the digital world has been showing swelling traction over the last 2 decades, perhaps it's also the case that there has been an acceleration of digital adoption, for instance, over the last year and a half of the pandemic. And maybe that's a good place to start. Lacina, you slightly further away from me, at least in terms of our location on stage. But given that Smart Africa has got a wider remit, continentally a wider remit, can you give us some sense of any catalytic forces underpinning the technological thrust, at least over the last year and a half?
Thank you very much for inviting me and inviting Smart Africa to share our insight about this opportunity, mainly amid COVID or pre-COVID, and as well as the e-commerce issues. First of all, just to give you, to set the stage, what is really Smart Africa, I think it's important to know. Thank you very much for introducing Smart Africa as a Pan-African multilateral organization with the sole vision for transform Africa into a single digital market by 2030. By saying so, we have Smart Africa set a 5 manifesto to be able to understand the context of where we're in and how do we operate. And those 5 manifesto, number 1 is to put ICT at the center of the national social economic development. And the 2 is to improve the access to ICT, especially the broadband. And number 3 of that is to improve accountability, transparency, efficiency, and openness through ICT in Africa. And number 4, which is very important, is to put the private sector first in our ecosystem. And the last and not the least is to basically leverage ICT to promote a sustainable development. So by saying that, it means the head of the state of Smart Africa are 32 head of the state, totaling about 850 million population out of 1.3 billion we're talking about. You're talking, this is similar to the population of China or even India. But yet, when you look at the growth and the opportunities in Africa, the opportunity that lies in Africa today, it does not lie anywhere else on this planet. Because we have about 70% of our young population less than 30 years old. Very important. If you look at the doing business by the World Bank Index is doing business in Africa, 6 out of 10 countries who score the best are from Africa, not from elsewhere. And also, very importantly, it is when you look at the mobile money, today in the registered mobile money market share, Africa owns more than 50%. And we own also 70% of the mobile money transactions globally, and we own 60% of the mobile money transaction value globally. It basically means Africa by nature, and it's just a mobile company, it's a mobile continent, and will lead the world by the mobile. Yet, when you look at the other side, which is the e-services, because the fintech and the financial transaction is only one pillar of the different 5 pillars of digital economy. Namely, when we talk about digital transformation, it really is about 5 main things. 1, intelligent government. 2, intelligent private sector. I call it intelligent, smart government, smart businesses. Number 3, very importantly, infrastructure, which is the connectivity. And number 4, it is basically innovation-based entrepreneurship. And number 5 is the skilling, reskilling, and upskilling. So among those sits also the fintech. Today already we are leading the world in fintech because some people in Africa, since they're born, they've never known a bank account. But they do have a mobile money account today. That's very important. That's just a few figures that I would like to throw for the debate. Thank you.
Lacina, as you're speaking, the word that comes to mind, and I don't like using it too often because it's so well-worn, is leapfrogging. And I think sometimes when people talk about, Africa leapfrogging through technology, it becomes a little bit meaningless because people just say it so often and it becomes well-worn. But I think there's still truth in the nature of your suggestion, because I'm mindful that 25 years ago, there was practically no mobile phones on the continent. Practically, and there was about maybe, let's call it 100 million fixed line telephones, and today there's still the same number of fixed line telephones, but there's about 850 million mobile subscriptions, not necessarily unique, but still 850 million, and it just, I guess, gives another illustration of that broader context which you provide of the ecosystem being ripe but not complete in the sense that there's still journey left. If I could turn to you now, Innocent, just as again, contextual. In some respects, Rwanda carries halo on the continent. It may be small in geographical footprint. It may only house 13 million people compared to Ethiopia's in excess of 100 million and Nigeria's in excess of 200 million. But I say it garners halo status for the manner in the burst of development over the last 2 or so decades. The celebrated level of civil society responsibility and its contribution to Rwanda's global image. But in tech too, it has been in its own way a little bit of a Silicon Valley, a little bit of a Dubai, a little bit of what Singapore is to trade. Can you give us color on what is Rwanda doing, particularly that's giving it this comparative advantage? And maybe also, what is it doing differently to the region specifically?
Thank you. Let me start by saying that it's a pleasure to be here once again, and it feels good after 20 or so months to meet people physically. having gone through the turbulent times that we've gone through. To respond to your question, it all boils down to leadership. If Rwanda did not have the leadership that it has today, we would not be where we are today. Because, I mean, you mentioned it, we're a small country geographically. We are only 13 million people, but these are 13 million minds that, if properly led and directed, we're able to do a lot of things. And I believe this is the same for every other African continent or every other country around the world, so to speak. Now, in terms of the digital space, for us, we were starting from a very low bottom line, if you will, and we had it no other way other than just to have a vision and a strategy and the impetus to execute it, because citizens were demanding for it. So from a digital point of view, just to give you, in terms of numbers, 2011, in terms of mobile financial services, what Lacina just mentioned, the mobile money services, we had less than 1 million subscribers. But today we have 10.7 million subscribers in terms of mobile financial services. And the FinScope, which is financial research that takes place every other 2 years, highlighted that the financial inclusion in Rwanda today is at 89%. Financial inclusion, 89%. But the caveat here is that what percentage of that is catered for by banks? It's very small, not actually more than 20 or 30%. You know. So that gives you a picture of what we're able to do and what we have done. Today we have 95% geographical coverage of 4G penetration across the country. In terms of internet subscription, we are over 65%. And these are numbers that we're really still pushing, because at the end of it all, what we were able to see in the last 20 months, we're able to show that, one, if you don't have, God forbid, if another pandemic like this came, then the only resort that we have to is digital, right? But to be able to do that, there are about 3 critical success factors that would enable any society to be able to do that. Number one, you have to have affordable, reliable connectivity. And that is what the vision of the country was about 15 years ago, to make sure that we have fiber optic cables across the country, 4G technology, and now we're looking at how do we move into 5G. You have to have affordable connectivity. Number two, you have to have affordable requisite devices. I mean, what good is it if you have connectivity but you don't have any tool to use it for, right? And then the third one is digital skills. You know, yes, you might have connectivity, you might have even a smartphone, a smart device, or whatever it is, but if you don't know how to use it, then it's not good. Then, and the final part of it is that you have to automate some of the services that you're looking at. For example, just in this pandemic around, the mobile transactions that were able to see grew by 400%. Actually, to be precise, 425%. But there were a few elements, a few incentives that had to be provided for them to be able to grow at that rate. For example, bringing down the cost of a transaction, making sure that at least you create an enabling environment for service providers to onboard so many customers, and actually mandating some of the services. For example, say school fees. Why would you have to go to a bank or any other agency to be able to pay cash when you're paying school fees for your kids? Pay it online. You know, and somehow forcing, not forcing in the sense of it, but really directing the society on things that are easier, cheaper, and efficient for them to be able to transact. For example, to do a COVID test, you have to pay, but what we had to do, we had to put in place mechanisms to enable citizens to pay online immediately and get results immediately. So these are some of the things that you had to put in place for the ecosystem to be able to start moving forward. E-commerce, we saw a significant growth of e-commerce service providers in the economy in the last 20 months or so. So there are quite a number of things that can be done, but it requires that focused leadership, focused vision, and impetus to be able to drive on that vision.
Innocent, you spoke about the frictions to wider digital adoption, and you spoke about costs. And then you went on and highlighted the hardware, and of course access to hardware. And I loved that because I have no doubt if I asked this audience to allow those members who are using a feature phone to raise their hands instead of a smartphone, I'm sure nobody in this audience has got a feature phone. Everybody has got a smartphone or two or maybe even three. But in Africa, the feature phone is still ubiquitous. Also, M-Pesa being the poster child of financial services, works on short message technology. In fact, early efforts at smartphones and M-Pesa on smartphones were simply not tractable because nobody had the smartphone hardware. So the sub $100 smartphone would be probably catalytic for further development. So could you just enunciate a little further this idea that when foreign investors come into Africa, I've often seen it's downloading a Western idea into an African market, and then you just realize, hey, but they don't have the hardware, for example. Just amplify where's the opportunity set potentially in that sometimes assumed dimension.
Thank you. By the way, tomorrow you will hear from one of companies in Rwanda that is actually manufacturing smartphones in Rwanda, Marathon. I believe the managing director is somewhere in the audience here, Ed Severa. You'll hear from him how that is going. But gone are the days where we have to take an idea that has worked in either Germany, Singapore, whatever, and say that it's going to work in Africa. It will not. Let me warn you, it will not work. But you really need to get down to Africa, understand the dynamics, and then co-create together with the Africans an idea that is going to flourish. And this is why M-Pesa that you mentioned was able to make it so big in Kenya. There were banks in Kenya that had actually tried to do something similar, but they failed miserably. And the reason they failed is they did not understand the dynamics. But M-Pesa, the guys went down, looked at the idea, and said, let's innovate around that idea. So the idea of a smartphone, a feature phone, yes, feature phones are still serving, and actually M-Pesa and the other financial service providers have flourished on that. However, it has its limitations. I mean, we cannot stay on just a USSD. It has its own inherent security issues, which we have to move away from. So that's why now we are going into automation. We have to get smartphones because I want to offer that financial service together with multiple other services on top of it. You know, if I'm going to have to pay using my phone, I want to look at, if I'm a merchant, I want to see what is my top selling product? Who is my top customer in this shop? And that you cannot be able to get those analytic capabilities on top of a feature phone. And that's why it is a huge potential for smartphones across the continent.
Lacina, if I could drift back to you. I guess there's so many anecdotes of how technology has boosted production and maybe even boosted cross-border trade. The bank that I am aligned to through our endeavors, we've helped farmers disintermediate the middleman, which has allowed them to boost their returns and in turn invest and boost their yields. By empowering them with smartphones, there's better weather interpretation and better utilization of resources. And specifically, give us some sense of how your entity, Smart Africa, is facilitating, even if it is boosting production locally in country, or cross-border activity?
Yeah, thank you very much for the questions. Basically, it is the what could be the outcome of the Continental Free Trade Agreements, which was enacted beginning of the year. It's basically Africa to be integrated as one market. But to do that, of course, we have challenges. What is Smart Africa doing into that? First of all, let's look at the statistics. The intra-Africa trade among African countries, it does not exceed 18%. In the European Union, intra-European Union trade represents 69%. 69, it means we don't talk to each other, we do not communicate with each other. Smart Africa as a catalyzer, in order to do that, before you trade with anyone, you need to know the KYC. Who are you? Know your citizen or know your customer. That's why Smart Africa launched Digital ID project which is a flagship project within Smart Africa, championed by Benin, and we're doing a pilot project between Benin, Rwanda, and Tunisia. By the way, all the North African countries are part of the Smart Africa except Libya because of the situations. So why are we choosing 3 different countries, 3 different regions? Because Benin belongs to ECOWAS region, and Rwanda belongs to EAC, and Tunisia belongs to North Africa. So it is important for us to be able to boost the intra-trade. First of all, who are you? It means digital identity. Second thing, payment. What is Smart Africa doing in terms of the payment? Republic of Ghana is championing a Pan-African e-payment system. Pan-African e-payment system, what does it mean? It means a platform for the payment system to interoperate between East, West, South, North, and Center of Africa. When we pilot that, it basically means that from Rwanda, with the e-commerce platform on Rwanda, you will be able to purchase something which is actually in the warehouses in Ghana or Cameroon, because the payment systems are integrated. This is one of the things we're doing. But we're not only limiting on that. We all have to know the obstacle for all of us, it is a cybersecurity. What are we doing in cybersecurity? The Republic of Cote d'Ivoire is championing the cybersecurity flagship for African countries, Smart Africa country member, to be able to act as one and respond as one, basically by putting together the essential pillars of cybersecurity in Africa. Because as digital economy is growing in our individual country, cyber attacks are coming on the rise. It's very important. I wanted to add some about to what Innocent actually said. The growth Africa has achieved in the mobile transactions, mobile money transactions, 70%. It's all done on 2G.
Yes.
2G, not smartphone. And we need to remember, with these positionings in Africa, and looking at each individual government in Africa which is not digitalized yet, it means that the potential is huge to seize in terms of private sector investing on the continent.
Lacina, I'm going to be opportunistic. I'm mindful that, say, 2 years ago when I looked at the data, there were about 400 active tech hubs across the continent. And that has swelled even further. Now it's in excess of 600. Dubai is pioneering in just so many ways, and it has its own poster moment reflections. What are the low-hanging fruit? Or what are the areas in which Dubai can invest in a partnership way or continue its gateway aspirations into the continent as it relates to tech? Where are the commercial opportunities, quite simply, if I can be that candid?
Thank you for the questions. Number 1 priority, e-commerce. And the logistic, when we say e-commerce, is based on e-payment. E-payment is based on a digital ID. However, that alone is not enough. E-commerce means logistics, and Dubai is known to be the mother of the logistics. Put it this way. I'm sitting in Rwanda at headquarters. I'm ordering something on AliExpress, which costs about $30. It costs me $90 to ship it from China to Africa. $90, 3 times the cost of the element on the e. So Dubai is known through the DPW, we all know, it's a big company, huge in Africa. If a priority should be somewhere, because put it this way, the payment system is not a problem. Regulatory issues on the payment is not really huge a problem. What is really a challenge? I don't call it a problem because problem, the only thing we cannot solve is the death. So everything in the world is just a challenge. So the challenge really here is the logistics to support the e-commerce on the back end. That is very important. With the growth that we've seen in the UAE in general, in Dubai in particular, if there is an investor who's willing to come to Africa, I believe that the e-commerce platform will be the priority. Because the e-commerce platform will actually pull everything. It will pull the e-payment. It will pull the digital ID. It will also accelerate the growth of e-services within each individual country.
Right.
Thank you.
Right. I should just mention we have about 5 minutes remaining of this session, so if anyone wants to post a question, please feel free to do so. I'm armed with the iPad for that. Also, if you have time over the ensuing days, several African countries are on display in all of its glory in the expo, so feel free to visit. It'll be great to have you at some of those expositions. Innocent, if I could just turn and to you, and perhaps you could just give some sense of how Rwanda, well, you've already emphasized how Rwanda has seen a swell in terms of digital adoption and mobile subscription. I'm mindful that the African average in terms of user data usage is 0.8 gigs per person. In Asia, it's more than 8 gigs. So in other words, it's about 10 times the equivalent data consumption. And you did mention costs as being, perhaps one prohibitive element, even though prices are falling. What about data roaming? What about the mobile companies themselves being innovative, looking for scale, and seeking to enhance individual usage so as to promote, for example, tech health, telemedicine, teleeducation? Is this happening? Do you see evidence of this in at least Rwanda?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, and thanks to the work that Smart Africa is doing on the continent, we saw roaming in East Africa removed. Basically, costs were removed. So I can move from Kenya to Rwanda to Uganda, Southern Sudan, roaming without any additional charges. And that has sparked a growth on the mobile services side of a very high percentage. I can't remember the exact percentage, but it's more than 30–40%. It has grown significantly. So that element in terms of the African market liberalization is proving very good. However, there's something that Lacina touched on. If you're talking about e-commerce, there are fundamental building blocks that we have to see in place. And if we don't see them, really, we will continue to struggle. Number one is the digital ID that he mentioned. It is very paramount to have a digital ID or single digital ID for that matter, because today if you went to any organization, you're going to find so many innocents, yet it's only one person. So that is very crucial. But furthermore, we need to see really innovative policy making. For example, if it was not the innovativeness of the Smart African colleagues that I work with to look at that liberalization in terms of roaming, we would not have been able to see that. And another thing that I did touch on a little bit earlier is, for example, in Rwanda, through our Irembo platform, we have more than 100 services offered online. But what are we doing to get even more online? Because we still have instances of services that are still manual, that are still analog. We really need to push that. And the telecom sector and other tech innovators, for that matter, are jumping onto that opportunity. And it is a huge opportunity, especially on the African continent. because we still have so many of these services that are still manual, and that is going to be the catalytic enabler to be able to have services automated, offered cheaply, efficiently, and faster to the citizens as they are needed.
Innocent, thank you. We have precisely a minute left, so I'm going to ask in the remaining 30 seconds for each of you just to make your final seductive bid to this audience of why Africa is so attractive. And I will talk less. So Innocent, your last 30 seconds. What's the attraction?
I have a lot of things that I can say, but today is not, don't want to say that the Africa of tomorrow and no, it's now. So for that matter, we are too late. Let's join hands and let's transform this continent and beyond.
Lacina, you've got 15 seconds to sell Africa.
Well, my final note is the global reset amid COVID for us in Africa is not a global reset. It is a Renaissance Africa 4.0, which is based on a sustainable growth using ICT. However, this can only be sustainable in time if we have a constant innovation. The innovation in the long run, it depends on an adaptive regulatory environment. Regulatory for development. Thank you.
Gentlemen, thank you. This then concludes our slot. Thank you for the applause without me ushering you. That's really welcome. Last bit of housekeeping, please remain seated. The next event, Innovator Solution Room, which is about 25 minutes of chapter, will begin shortly. Thanks again for having us.